One late evening, I was riding my bike home when I saw a big guy in sunglasses walking towards me. He stopped me and said, "Do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions?" His words put me on edge, so I replied, "No, sorry, I have to go," and continued on my way. I felt adrenaline coursing through my veins. I don't know what exactly in his voice or gaze seemed suspicious to me, but I understood that it was better not to get involved. I kept riding, trying not to look back, but thoughts that this man might be following me wouldn't leave my mind. A block later, I had to stop at a red light. I stopped and looked back and saw that the guy was running towards me. He was about 6 or 7 meters away, and at that moment, fear gripped me. I was scared and started to move away. He was just a couple of meters away before I managed to get going, and I felt my heart race faster. You can't imagine how fast I was pedaling on my bike. I was pedaling with all my might, trying not to think about what might happen if he caught up with me. I passed several shops, zooming past people who didn't even notice me. At that moment, it felt like the whole world had frozen, and only I and this big guy existed in this reality. After about 3 to 4 blocks, I decided to look back. The guy was still chasing me, and that made me even more anxious. I had never pedaled so hard in my life, not slowing down for a moment all the way home. I felt my leg muscles burning, but I couldn't stop. I knew that if he caught me, I couldn't even imagine what would happen. I rode past a park where people usually walked, but it was empty now. The night enveloped everything around, and only the light from the street lamps illuminated the road. I realized that if someone were around right now, it might help me, but there was no one. I felt lonely and helpless, as if the whole world had turned its back on me. I started thinking about how to get out of this situation. Maybe I should turn onto one of the side streets, but I understood that if he caught up with me, I would have nowhere to go. I decided that it was better to keep moving on the main road. Perhaps there would be more people there, and I could find a chance to escape. I kept pedaling, trying not to think about what was happening behind me. Every time I looked back, he was getting closer. It was like a horror movie where the main character tries to escape from their pursuer. I began to imagine him grabbing me by the shoulder and pulling me back. These thoughts only fueled my speed, and I continued to pedal as if my life depended on it. Finally, I saw a familiar turn ahead. It was the road to my home. I knew that if I could reach it, I could lock myself in and be safe. I turned and started racing down the narrow street, but at that moment I heard him shout something. I didn't stop, I just kept pushing forward, my heart pounding like crazy. When I reached my house, I noticed that the lights in the windows were on. This gave me a bit of confidence. I quickly parked my bike, leaving it on the lawn, and dashed to the door. I couldn't believe I was almost home, but at that moment I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw that he was also turning toward me. I burst into the house and locked the door, feeling adrenaline still surging through my veins. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. Thoughts swirled in my head about what had just happened. I couldn't believe that this man had been chasing me. I looked out the window, but saw no one. A few minutes passed before I could calm down. I sat on the couch, trying to gather my thoughts. My mind was racing with questions. Why had he chased me? What did he want? Maybe he just wanted to talk, but his behavior was too threatening. I pulled out my phone and started looking for information on what to do in situations like this. I found several tips on how to avoid being followed and what to do if someone behaves suspiciously. I realized that I needed to be more aware and cautious when I was out, especially at night. The next morning, I decided to tell my parents about the incident. I didn't want them to worry, but I understood it was important. When I told them, they were very concerned. My mom suggested that I avoid riding my bike at night, and my dad advised me to take note of any suspicious vehicles I might see. From that point on, I became more cautious. I started avoiding dark streets and tried to get home before it got dark. I also wrote down my bike's serial number and kept it in a safe place in case something happened. I understood that the world isn't always safe, and I needed to be prepared for anything. Despite the fear, I didn't want this incident to break me. I continued to ride my bike, but with greater caution. I began to notice my surroundings, paying attention to people who might pose a threat. I learned to trust my instincts and not ignore warning signs. Time passed, and I forgot about the fear I felt that night. I continued living my life, but I always remembered how important it was to be attentive and careful. This incident taught me a lot, and I became stronger and more confident in myself. In the end, I realized that fear is a normal part of life, but it's important to know how to deal with it. I learned not to be afraid, but to be ready for any surprises. And although that big guy remained in the past, I knew that I would always remember the lesson he taught me.